The spacer that needs to be removed is this one here, because this is the connection to the front of the engine. Back here is the mount bracket, and so what we're trying to do is just create that little gap in there so the belt can be fed in. The way we do that is you've got this bolt in here, you've got the sound insulation there. What you can do to get easier access to that is actually just pull that forward, and you're going to be able to put a spanner on that. It's a 16mm, and you'll need just a bare ring spanner. The workshop manual talks about a specific tool designed for it, but a normal 16mm ring spanner is going to work well for you. I've got a ratchet ring spanner which was too big, that didn't actually fit in here, and I'd broken my normal 16mm, so a 5/8 Imperial worked perfectly. It's about 16.1, 16.2 millimeters, so it'll also fit on there. Also, you need this to be reasonably straight. So most ring spanners have a significant bend in them. You actually want it to be reasonably straight, because if it's not, then it's actually going to impinge either over here or on the engine side, depending on which orientation you have. So that's what you want to do. I would suggest, because what we don't want to do is drop the spacer here, is I've just fit a rag. There's not much of a gap in here. I had to force it down in here and pull it out with a pair of pliers and then sort of wiggle it here, but then it will hopefully stop any chance of this thing falling down. And also what I'm going to do is have a magnetic tool connected to this when I remove the screw here, so I'm sort of doubling up my chances of this thing not dropping. If you've got a lift like me, fine, you can go and fish the thing out, but if you don't, it's going to be a problem if you drop this underneath the car. There's that screw that holds in the spacer once it's removed, so it's reasonably long. The tool that I used, it's a 5/8, but 16mm is the correct number. You can see there's not too much of a bend on that, and that seemed to work out perfectly. I would suggest having a pipe to go over the top of this so you can put a decent amount of leverage on it. Firstly, to get it off, but then later on you need to put 50 Newton meters on this screw when you reinstall everything. So what I will do when I install it is put it on with this, then put the pipe over it, and then make some calculations with the measurement from there to the end of the pipe, where I'm actually going to apply force using some luggage scales, and that will accurately put 50 Newton meters on it, but I'll do that at the time when I install. So removing the screw from in here, I've got that about halfway out at the moment. I would suggest having a magnetic tool to grab hold of this as well, rather than fumbling around with your fingers, because there is a gap down here, and again, you do not want to drop that down there. That's going to be a bit hard to fish out. So there is that spacer that is now out, and you can see it's just connected to the magnetic tool. Having the rag and the magnetic tool there work really nicely. The spacer was stuck in there a little bit. It's not loose, so I had to tap it out just with this screwdriver and a light mallet. Do it from this side, from the screwdriver side here that I'm showing, and push it out that way. Don't try and push it this way, because you'll have the vibration damper there, which it'll just jam up against. So push it out that way, and that just held onto that nicely so it doesn't get dropped. The tensioner, the roller for the tensioner is this one down here. The thing that you need to put a big spanner on and turn is that one. It's a 30mm, and either the ring end or the open end will work perfectly okay. And what we're going to do is push it in this direction, and then you'll notice that the roller here will rotate down, and we can easily pull off the belt, which is then going to allow the thing to be nice and loose. Once it's off, I can just release the tensioner and allow it to pop back up again, no problems at all. And then when I install, clearly I'm going to route the belt in the correct position, and then I'm going to put the spanner on here again, rotate it down so I can fit it over here. Having pulled the belt on and off a few times now, this is what I would suggest. Put the seats all the way forward and straddle and sit on the armrest there like you're riding a horse. And that's going to make it relatively simple to get your hands in. There's very little room down the front here between the mount and the front of the vibration damper. There's a little bit of room down the side here to get the belt around the water pump, which sits down the bottom there. It's easy enough to pull the belt off these pulleys here. After you've pulled it off that, you can reach your hand down here and pull it around the water pump. You'll need to twist it so it's at 90, or so it's basically facing straight up. It's going to make it a lot easier, and then you're going to have to work on getting it out of here. Now the book talks about just cutting this off, which if you're going to replace it because it's toast, mate, just cut the thing off. It's going to be much easier. But if you want to just check it, like you're pulling it out to have a bit of a play for whatever, and you want to put the same belt back on, it's definitely doable. But down the sides here especially, it gets jammed up, and so I found the best idea is to actually sort of push it down and rotate, and then eventually it'll wiggle, otherwise it'll just get jammed in there and it won't come out. So that's loosening the tensioner, and that just comes off. Now I can just pull all this and make that nice and loose, and now I'm going to reach down here, twist it, and pull it off the water pump. There we go, finally. So twisting and pushing it that way seems to be the key, and then that will come out of the gap like that, and then you can just pull it out to one of these two sides, then putting it back in, push it down and get it around the vibration damper first. And that's got it around there now. It's a lot easier on the way up because it doesn't get snagged against the ribs in the belt. Don't put it around the top ones yet. Make a fold up here like this, so now we can put it under the water pump. I'm doing this a fair bit by feel. There we go, that's around there now. I don't want it on that tension, so I'm going to make that loose, and now I'm going to feed it over the top of these, underneath that roller. And to get it onto the pulley here, put it all the way around all of the places. It'll try and bunch up around the water pulley, have this sort of pushed down a little bit, the belt down, so you can get your hands down in here and make sure it's fed all the way around correctly onto the water pump. And then once you do that, then you can just rotate that around and we can slip this thing on. And prior to releasing it, have a look around and check that it's all in the correct spot. And when you do your first start, I would suggest making sure you have this cover off, so you have the engine mount correctly bolted together again, but make sure you have this off so you can actually see that this is running fine for the first time that you start it. To get the spacer in the correct position, this is a tight fit, and so what I found I needed to do was with one hand put it in place, but then get a screwdriver and open this gap up just slightly, and then as soon as it opens up you can push it in a little bit, and once there you can release it. It'll just hold it in place, and now you can just tap it into the correct position prior to putting the bolt in. When you are tapping the spacer into place, what I found was whilst you're doing it, or check it, like only move it a little bit at a time, and then check it just by feel around here, because you're not going to be able to feel where the hole is on the inside here, and it needs to be centered prior to putting the bolt in place. So just feel with your hands, and what I thought was central seemed to work out perfectly, and the bolt just slotted straight in. Now the bolt itself, actually there's a big void down in here where the bolt actually slots down into, so you can actually pull it all the way out, but getting it in there is a bit of a pain. So I would suggest having a magnetic tool holding onto it with one hand coming down here, the other one holding it with a magnetic tool so you can feed it down there without dropping, and then you can push it forward. And with the spacer centralized, that just slotted straight in really easily. So this is how I'm going to torque it correctly, because I'm not going to be able to get a torque wrench onto it. This is the steel pipe that I regularly use on lots of stuff on cars. That's the spanner there, and what I've done is measured 50 centimeters from there to there, made a mark. And what I'm going to do is use some luggage scales, which I know are really accurate, and I'm going to apply the correct weight at that distance to create the correct torque. The torque spec is 50 Newton meters, which is 50 newtons at 1 meter, or 100 newtons at 50 centimeters, which is what that distance is there, which is going to be simple for me. So 100 newtons is nearest down to 10 kilograms. So if I put this on here, zero this out and apply 10 kilograms of force at that 50 centimeters. Now I'm going to apply my 10 kilograms. There we go. And like I said before, leave the cover off, do the first start, looking at it, check that everything is good to go, and that the belts are aligned correctly. These are the pulleys from the belt drive on the car. This one here is the one that's on the tensioner. Each of these has a cap. There's a big one and a small one, big one on the bottom one, which is the tensioner. You can just get a screwdriver and just pop those off. Big bolt, T50 to take those off. And to install, they take 23 Newton meters. I would suggest checking these, and they're actually really easy to check. All you need to do is remove the rear engine or that front engine cover from the back wall of the cabin, and you don't have to disconnect the mount and remove that spacer, because all you need to do is just put the spanner on the tensioner, turn it, release the belt, and then just pull it off each of those, and you don't even have to remove these. You can just spin them in place and you'll see very quickly if they need to be removed or not. And it's interesting, these are obviously very good quality because the car is 63,000 kilometres, and I would have expected that these would be pretty loose by now, but honestly these feel like they are brand new. So that's the one off the tensioner. It was actually a little bit difficult to get to. That T50, you've got the wall of the car about there, and there is not a whole lot of room to get in. The workshop manual actually talks about using a bit and a special attachment, so you only need to get into about here somewhere, but I was able to get a T50 in there with my torque wrench, which is relatively narrow where it connects to the actual bit. For the top one, it's really easy to get off. Again, you just pop off that cover. On the back of it, interestingly, there's this big washer which protects the back of it, which is kind of nice, so you can just spin that on before you install. But again, you can just spin those and check if they need to be replaced or not. These are nice and tight like new, and if they are noisy and sort of rattly, they can move around a little bit, then I would suggest replacing those.